Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to our webinar. I'm Reverend Hector J. Hernandez, and I serve as the Director of Community Engagement for the National Benevolent Association of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. As we get started, I would like to inform that we're going to be recording this webinar and it will be available for future viewing at our website, nbacares.org. And we are joyful today. This webinar starts our 2021 series of webinar and educational training offered by the Prison and Jail Ministries of the National Benevolent Association. Today's webinar is titled Voices of Reentry, the challenges of returning from incarceration. There is so much discussion about the challenges confronting people who have been incarcerated and are returning to their communities, to our communities. But what do they want us to know that would assist in their attempts to re-enter their communities and congregations successfully? Today, in this space, our Reverend Dean Bucalos, who is MBA's Prison and Jail Ministries Mission Specialist, will be joined by an amazing panel of formerly incarcerated individuals who wish to answer this very question. And before we begin, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, we welcome you to use the Q&A feature by clicking on the icon at the bottom of your screen and submit your questions. And please, we invite you to include your email address in case we are unable to get to your answers. We could follow up with you directly via email after the webinar is over. Our presenters today are Brittany Harrington, and she is the peer program coordinator for Pathway in Ashland, Kentucky, and the project coordinator of an HRSA grant titled First Day Forward. And First Day Forward's mission is to pair a person living incarceration with a person in sustained recovery to help navigate the reentry process. She has 9 years experience working in the behavioral health field, including 2 years working with the Department of Community-Based Services START team. We welcome you, Brittany, today. With us here today is also Julius Johnson, who is the Director of Reentry Services for the Lexington Rescue Mission in Lexington, Kentucky. His field of expertise revolves around prison reentry. He recently finished a master thesis on women in reentry. And Julius has explained that his reentry work, and let me take time to pronounce this correctly because it escapes my tongue. Fayette County Detention Center, most of the surrounding counties, including 2 states prisons. And through his work as Director of Reentry Services, Julius shares the information he has learned, the experience he has gathered with other organizations, and works to put them into practical use. We welcome you, Julius. And also with us today is Savi Shabazz, and he is the acting president of All of Us or Non-Louisville. He is also a 2018 NME Genius Fellow and a member of the 2019 Community Justice Action Fund Speakers Bureau and the Mass Story Lab Speakers Bureau. After Mr. Chavez was sentenced to a total of 28 years in prison for drug offenses, he dedicated himself to standing on Life Coach Each One Teach One Reentry Fellowship, which brings awareness and prevention to the three P's, and that is prison, probation, and parole. And he shared with us something, he states the following: my life has transformed and come into full bloom. My life today is in full stride due to my large dose of humanity. Seeds of self-destruction and hatred were planted long before, developed into seeds of strength and determination along the journey. This is beautiful. Out of this struggle, I have been born, and through this struggle, I am becoming complete. Thank you, Mr. Sabas, for sharing this with us, and we welcome you. And the moderator of this webinar, like I said early before, is our Reverend Dean Bucalos. He is the mission specialist for the MBA Prison and Jail Ministries Affinity Group. And he's also an ordained minister of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. He has served as pastors of congregations in Kentucky, Illinois, and Indiana. He is also the founding pastor of New Life in Christ Christian Church. That is a congregation he began inside a women reentry facility in Louisville, Kentucky. And he just retired as executive director of Mission Behind Bars and Beyond. And that is an ecumenical reentry program that trains small faith-based group to work with returning citizens upon their release from prison. So thank you, Dean, for being our host today. And I'm passing the presentation to you.
Thank you, Hector. I appreciate that. And I'm delighted to have this outstanding group of panelists to join us today. It's really been a delight to work with them. They come to us with a wealth of experience, but also a passion for this particular topic and this work. In preparation of this webinar, we sent each of them 4 questions that we'd like them to consider and answer for us today. And we'll be doing that as we proceed with our webinar this afternoon. And then there'll be a time for questions and answers after that. And I'm going to share a little bit after our presenters respond to these questions. I'm going to share a little bit about how our churches and congregations can respond and get involved in this type of important work. So I'm going to start by asking this question. What was your greatest challenge upon leaving incarceration? And I'll call on Brittany to answer this one initially.
So I feel like challenge is a rough one. Challenges is more like it. And this question can be looked at from 2 different folds. You've got physical challenges, like housing and employment, and getting a car and having money. And you've got emotional challenges. And I truly think I was blessed with one family member's support when I got out. So I had a place to live. I had a spare bedroom at my grandmother's home. My greatest challenge was the emotional challenge, the shame that came with navigating all the other challenges that reentry faces you. For instance, walking into my first job interview was at Sears. And I remember just feeling so nervous because I knew that the question was going to come up of why I checked yes in a box that asked if I'd ever been convicted of a felony. And it did. And I'll tell you guys, I humbly brag that I just slammed this interview, and I did great. And at the end of it, she said, "So tell me about this felony conviction." She said, "Tell me about why there's a box checked here." And I said, I explained about my drug addiction and how I had 20 months sober or 21 months sober at this point. And why I was different. And I hope she gave me a chance. And because of their no tolerance policy, she couldn't have hired me regardless. And she tried to advocate for me, but that didn't stop there. I had to go apply for another job, who again told me, unfortunately, we can't hire convicted felons. So every time that I exposed myself, knowing that I was different, knowing that now I was a mother who could care about my son, knowing that I was almost 2 years sober, knowing that my renew on life was fresh and my determination had come back, and I'd applied for college and I was a new person, I still had to be that convicted felon every time that I talked to someone. Every time that I went into a situation, I had to go in with just heavy shoulders of just my past. And that's still there because you can still Google my mugshots. So my personal greatest challenge was the shame that incarceration just drags behind you, no matter how different or evolved you become. Is that okay?
Thank you, Brittany. I'm going to ask Savvy to follow up on this question, knowing that each of you have very different life experiences, and yet there's a common thread that runs through your lives. So, Savvy, what was your greatest challenge upon leaving incarceration?
First of all, greetings to everybody. I want to thank you for having me into the space. One of the, I have to agree with Brittany. It's more like challenges because there's a lot of different ones. As far as housing, employment, education, transportation. But then the biggest one is probably fear. Fear. And I think I can be inclusive to everything that I just named and everything she spoke about with just that fear. Fear of not knowing where you're going to live at. A housing situation, transitional housing. I found out that transitional houses is more close to a homeless shelter or close to being outside. Employment. I'm an orator, and I just show out, I perform when it comes down to an interview, and then that question comes and it just takes everything out of you. That can be very emotional. That can be very mentally challenging as well. Education, straight A student, got an opportunity to go back to college, but there were some grants and scholarships that I couldn't apply for, such as the Keys Scholarship. There was things that I couldn't get that I really needed. One of the biggest challenges for me was those just all wrapped up into one. Being able to something basic as just grocery shopping. After being gone so long, and I wasn't gone that long, but I was gone long enough to where I didn't know how to use self-checkout because they didn't exist when I left, and it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing to have to ask my sister to show me how to use the self-checkout in Kroger's. It was embarrassing to have to ask my 13-year-old nephew how I need to use this card at this laundromat because it didn't take quarters anymore. So it's a lot of emotional challenges, mental challenge, psychological challenge, and a lot of physical challenges as well. Those are just a sample of some of the ones that I was faced with.
Thank you, Savvy. I'm gonna move on to the next question, and I'm gonna start by asking Julius, because he's directly working now with folks in the process of reentering. So moving from the personal to a little bit broader perspective, generally, what did you or do you see as the greatest obstacle or barrier for those returning from prison and jail today, Julius?
I guess, again, I just want to thank you for having me. The greatest obstacle I see today is, I would say, is housing. I can, like I said, it's many obstacles, but one that I see on a daily basis that I'm really focusing in on is housing. Here at the Lexington Rescue Mission, with our reentry division, we was awarded $260,000 to help those that are homeless offenders. But the thing is we got the money, but so many people still don't want to allow felons or sex offenders to stay on those properties. So it's like it's like almost like not having it, because you have it and you can't spend it. And so that's one of the biggest obstacles. And we're working with Department of Corrections. They're working on some things right now to try to bring some awareness to the need for housing and the importance of how housing the importance housing has on stopping or reducing recidivism. And it's just a headache to have all this money to spend, but everybody says, I'm not housing that group. So I would say that is the biggest challenge.
Thank you, Julius. And I'm gonna call on Brittany again, because I know that she's still presently working with people who are in this transition process. So moving away from your own personal challenges, what do you see now as the greatest obstacle or barrier for those returning from prison or jail, that you can add to what Julius had to say?
Well, I hate to piggyback off Julius, but Julius, you work with a more urban population in the central Kentucky region. You got Fayette County, but I work in Appalachia, and I think that this isn't something we're going to see in Lexington and in Eastern Kentucky. We're going to see it everywhere. But housing is our #1 barrier. I mean, we've got employers that support hiring people, far few between, but we have people who are willing to hire. We have the treatment and resources available to support growth and getting better and healing from mental illness and substance use and other things, trauma. But it is hard to get these people in stable housing, and a lot of government assistance programs that help people in lower income categories, which these people would fall into, have very strict policies against people with certain offenses. So even like Julie said, you got this pocket of money, but where you house these people, they have rules, and the stigma is far greater. And we spend a huge bulk of our time and our energy advocating for these people, saying they're not that person they are on paper. This is a good person. This is a great person. They're sincere. They're driven. They've done this, and this. And it's all nil because of what has been wrote about them. So housing is absolutely our #1 barrier to reentry. And unfortunately, these people spend weeks and sometimes months in homeless shelters or sober living homes, years even in sober living homes, just trying to find a place to rent or to live.
Thank you, Brittany. I'm going to follow up and invite any one of the three of you to respond to this. But I know that in order to be released on parole, you have to have a housing placement. And obviously, most rental housing requires a down payment or a security deposit or something. So how does that happen? I mean, I know that maybe you all can enlighten us. So how much money did you have in your pocket when you left? a place of incarceration where you were, and how do you navigate that in trying to find adequate, safe, and decent housing?
Yeah, I'll just say something quick about that as far as the probation and parole. I know a lot of people have talked about the last year about a lot of people being released from prison due to the governor's issues and all of that, issued those people to be released. But there was some systematic, I don't know, some racism, systematic, I don't know what the word would be for talking about poverty, but it's the same thing. But if, like you said, people have to have a home placement in order to be released. And you look at it, that even was the case with those being released early. And so that was almost, a lot of times people aren't able to come home or through those governor issue to be able to come home because they have no home placement, because they don't have any money, the family money to have, to have those houses ready for them to come home. So there was something in that I actually posed to a couple of people, that it was like, it sounds good to let everybody home, but like, if y'all don't have the money to have a place to stay, it's almost like a sentence within a sentence. Almost, you can't go home. You have to stay here to deal with COVID because you don't have any money. So it's a lot of stuff. And I know Savvy knows a lot more. That's what he works on. So,
Yeah, I remember vaguely remembering being released from Dismas Charities in Louisville, Kentucky, and I had a 13-inch clear TV. I had a white laundry bag, and I had about $3.40 in my pocket, and I had to get to the parole office and check in before they closed that day, all at the same time trying to meet the landlord at the transition house that came equipped with mice, roaches. The oven didn't work in the kitchen, no hot water in the bathroom, mold in the tub, looked like it had been there for 100 years. And to get over to probation and parole in the same day. Unfortunately, they don't release formerly incarcerated people, directly impacted people with those tools. We're released with a toolbox, but there's never any tools in them. You go in the parole office and you see all these great signs hanging up that so-and-so's hiring, and if you need help with such and such. And I don't recall ever having that discussion with any of the parole officers that I've had, and I've had several, about the assistance, about things that's hanging up, the signs and the flyers that's hanging up in there. So there's a lot of barriers out there, and that was one of mine with the experience. Executive order was signed to release hundreds of people, but what's the plan? Like, what's the agenda? I'm still seeing a lot of people that are coming home that have no idea what they want to do. And, just studying a lot of sociology, culture shock is real. And that's what I was faced with when I stepped on that sidewalk with that 13-inch clear TV. It was a culture shock. What's going on out here? What am I going to do with this $3.40?
Thank you, Savvy. Brittany, did you want to add something?
I did. I wanted to add that they expect home placement, and when you don't have the resources, mind you, if you go into any county jail with money, that money is taken from you and then put on the fees it costs to house you, and you don't get a say in that. That money becomes their money, and you walk out poor. Unless you've got thousands, and then you probably got a trafficking charge or something, and you lose it anyway. So you don't get to leave with money. They will get it from you and take it without your consent. So, but the second thing is they require placement, and you're 100% right, Reverend. With no money, you can't obtain placement yourself. And just remember, 80 to 90%, if not higher than that, of these people don't come from supportive, healthy homes. They don't come from wealth. They don't come from places that are good and clean and healthy. So when we're seeking out placement, one of two things happen. One, there's no adequate placement because mom's got a dope charge too, or grandma's been convicted of trafficking as well, or there's been a domestic violence call last week at dad's house, or you go back to who you used to know, and the placement gets approved, and you're in an unhealthy situation no matter what. So you're almost more fortunate to go to a dump that the government offers for you to transition into real life, versus go back to where you got sick, go back to where you got in all this trouble, where you're just falling back into old criminal lifestyles and behaviors. And it's just a cycle that's not set up for anything relatively close to success, and it sucks. And I know Julius and Savvy and myself were working aimlessly to fix this. And any chance you get to talk to, I see 49 people, to just listen and know that these things can change and is a blessing. It's a huge blessing. So thank you guys, for real.
Thank you, Brittany. I'm going to move on to our next question, which takes us behind the bars. We do know that 95% of the people who are presently incarcerated, this is across the country, are eventually coming back into our communities at some point in time. So if you had the opportunity to speak with someone getting ready to be released, what advice would you give him or her? And I'll start with Savvy on this one.
So yeah, so that's a great question, and that it falls right into exactly some of the things that we do. So I actually do make connections and have the opportunity to work with a few individuals across the state of Kentucky that are incarcerated in state institutions, and they are coming home every day. I communicate with those individuals through a system called JPay. It allows us to communicate through email. It allows my organization to send them stamps and funding to make commissary as well. And one of the things that we like to utilize is just being able to make the connection, make sure that the person is supported. That was one of the big things that's missing. That wasn't missing with me. I had a great support system, and I really do believe that the support system I had here in Louisville and in Paducah is what propelled me and what pushed me to get through a lot of situations. The advice that I would give and what I found out for a lot, just from my own experience and even working with the individuals coming home, we have to have some kind of plan, and a realistic plan at that. I had several drug charges, so a realistic goal is not to apply for a pharmaceutical job at Walmart. We have to have those realistic conversations. So we have to have a realistic plan. We also have to change the narrative and change the language that we use as well. I noticed that was a big one too. A lot of guys that I've worked with, they've never worked before. They've never been employed. But one in particular, he told me that he was on the lawn care crew while he was incarcerated. I said, so you know how to do, and all he knew was cutting grass. And I told him, I said, so that sounds like you know how to do landscaping. So can we change the language for that? I had another guy, he said he was a janitor. I said, well, you ever think about being environmental services? So to be able to change the language while we're building out those resumes, individuals are getting a lot of experience, but we have to have realistic plans. I've seen a lot of parole plans. I've had one myself, and it just wasn't realistic. And I was released, and I made a sheet. I just looked at that sheet too. It's actually sitting right here with 3, 5, 7, and 10-year plans on it. And due to the support system that I had, I'm all the way up to the 7th year. I'm a little behind with that, but I really think that if we can set some goals and have some realistic expectations and plans, I think we can really get individuals on the right path. And support is going to be definitely the biggest one. I never would have thought in 100 years that there'd be organizations like Julius, be organizations like Brittany's, all of us are none, life coaches. I did not know these local and national organizations existed, and they are combined of individuals just like us. So that support system from our family and that support system from those organizations really is what we're looking at. We get those newspapers in, those national newspaper, all of us are nuns, to as many institutions as we possibly can, so people can know we're waiting on you. We will support you when you come home, because the last thing that I want somebody to be faced with is some of the issues that I was faced with when I came home. I want to be able to take those things away from individuals when they come home.
Thank you, Savvy. I'm going to call on Julius. If you could speak with someone getting ready to be released, what advice would you give him or her, Julius?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to stay away from what Savvy said, he said everything. I would agree with everything he just said. And so we go into the prisons and the jails, like we said at first, and this is something we actually train our volunteers and mentors on what to say. And one of the things is try to calm people down, because like Savvy was talking about is earlier when he said that culture shock is real. And so the way I can explain it is like the Matrix. It's like if you've ever dealt with anybody that's been incarcerated, it's almost like everything, when they come out, it's like everything coming out at one time. And so what we do is try to get them to calm down before they face that, and just take your time. It's going to come at you fast. You can't do everything at one time. Do one thing, pick this and pick that and pick that. And Robert K. Merton, I don't know if anybody's read up on him, but Robert K. Merton had a study called had a theory called the strain theory. And strain theory talks about the reason why people get incarcerated or reincarcerated is based off of stress. And so the stress causes people to go and do things that they don't really want to do, but that stress is that factor. So what we try to tell people is don't let stress get to you. Find somebody to talk to. Just take your time, and so just try to build that and calm them down a whole lot as they're about to leave. Yeah.
Thank you, Julius. I'll ask you, Brittany, if you have anything to add. If you could speak with someone who's getting ready to be released, what advice would you give him and her? And in the work that I've done, when we talk about getting ready to be released, we try to go back about 6 months before that release date, so that it's not something that just you figure all this stuff out a week before, but that you, as Savvy mentioned, that you start making plans, you start envisioning what life is going to be like when you leave, but you start almost right after you are incarcerated to begin that process. So if you could speak with someone getting ready to be released, what advice would you give to him or her?
Well, my advice is probably a little more crass, though I love what Savvy and Julia said. And I agree, until we change systematically how reentry is done, reentry should start from date of conviction. So the date they get convicted, whether they're given a 1-year sentence, a 5-year sentence, a 20-year sentence, reentry process should start then. What are we going to do when we get out? How are we going to survive? What's our goals? Savvy, I did the same thing, dude. I had a 1-year goal, a 5-year goal, and then everything was broke down. So I love that. My advice is get humble, get ready to work. Reentry is not easy. It is not, it is hard. It's hard emotionally, it's hard physically, and you created all the damage. So you made this mess through whatever choice you made. It's time to clean up. And it's time to get to work and be tough, because it's hard. It's not for the faint of heart. So, but you got to have wingman. You can't do it alone. You got to have people. You got to have people that inspire you to see. You got to have people that allow you to see possibility. Because if you're surrounded by people who aren't very far, there's not a lot of possibility to be found. So, mentors, advocates, people who have been there, done that are great for this navigation.
Thank you. Great answers. I appreciate you all. The fourth question that we sent to you is really critical to this webinar. So our webinars are really designed with 2 goals in mind. One is education, lifting up issues, helping people become informed about some of the very important social justice issues that are out in our culture and our society, but not just lifting them up and learning about them in their heads, but also taking that to heart and developing action plans to be able to help solve some of these issues and some of these problems. And I've always found that if you're trying to assist someone, the best thing to do is ask them, not try to assume what you think they need, but also sit down and meet them where they are and ask those questions. So that's what this last question is really about. What do you want faith communities and the community at large to know or to do to prepare for the reentry of people from prison or jail? And I'll start this one with Julius, and then we'll let the other two of you respond as well.
Yeah, so we are a faith-based organization here at Lexington, the Lexington Rescue Mission. So a lot of times with the faith community, a lot of times people run into the jails and they want to just preach. I thought about this, I use this exercise or speaking point a lot of times when talking about the faith community. And it was actually at a MB3 training a few years ago, and where we drew what we thought a good mentor or something like that was. And so I drew two pictures, one with a face, two with faces, and one with a big ears and a little mouth, and the other one with a big mouth and little ears. And the thing was that a lot of times people come in to preach, that's the big mouth and little ears. And when you're talking about really reaching the people and really trying to figure out what it is, you need to have the big ears and the small mouth. You need to listen more. A lot of times the doctor can have all the information in the world, but his greatest asset he does is when you walk in to the doctor's office, he says, "What's ailing you?" And so, and that's when he's able to, he doesn't say, "Well, I know this and I know this," and talk about all his years of experience, but he's able to apply what he knows because he's heard the issue. And I think that's what I would say to the faith community: listen to the issues individually. Eventually, you'll get a bigger understanding of the greater issues. But when you're really talking to people, you really want to go in with a sense. I want to hear from them and listen, and not just go in with a ready-made scripture, a ready-made sermon. And another thing is, I think it's Matthew 35, where it talks about seeing Jesus in the, they asked him, when did we see you sleeping on the street, or homeless, or in prison, or jail? And he says, to the least of them. And so sometimes we go into the jails wanting to teach, but if we're going in expecting to see Jesus, I think we would take a different perspective of how we walk into that place and that space. And I think just understanding that, don't go in, because a lot of times these people have been damaged enough, and sometimes they can be damaged by scripture too if you're not careful.
Thank you, Julius. Savvy, you want to take a shot at this one?
Yes. Great job. It's always hard to go after Julius. We've been doing these calls for some time now. But I like the way that me, Julius, and Brittany are feeding off each other, because the experience is real. Everybody has different experiences, but you hear a lot of the similar stories coming out of all three of us. One thing that I always try to do with people, formerly incarcerated people, directly impacted people, and that's one of the big things, the reason I keep saying that, we've worked hard across this nation to change the narrative and change the language that we use, and remove the negative context of convicted felons and felons. And we are formerly incarcerated people. We're people with lived experience. We're directly impacted people and system impacted people. So I like to put a humanization on individuals. When I work with an individual, just being honest, one of the last questions that come up is what faith that they believe, because I'm here to assist. And their faith and their religious context belongs to them. That's their relationship. My job with them is to assist them and support them the best that I can. One of the biggest things that I try to do also is put people in the right positions. Julius, you mentioned that mentor. Mentor comes in all shapes and forms, but mentors can also be dictators too. So it's going to be hard for somebody to mentor me about reentry. They've never been locked up or incarcerated before. That's going to be a hard duty. But just imagine how simple it can be if I had Brittany or Julius, somebody that's had similar experiences to me. When I found out that Julius had been incarcerated, it's like me and him just kicked it off. That understanding is just understood. It's just something that we have. So you got to put people in the right positions to mentor as well. And I think that's why a lot of mentor programs that I've ran into are, well, I'll be honest, are failing. Not everyone can mentor me. We have to get organic intellectuals. That's a theory. You have to be organic about it. You have to go get the same people from the same environment to mentor the individuals that you want mentored. And I think that's why we can see a lot of the change and a lot of the people to know, support the individuals when they come home. Give it an opportunity, open up the door. Somebody pushed the buttons for me, so we're going to have to push those buttons for individuals as well. Trust individuals. You know, we talk about a lot of second chance this, second chance this. A lot of us, due to systemic issues, we never got the first chance. And here we are already talking about the second and third chance. Some of us never got a first chance. You know, like I said, you know, a lot of people have tools. We have the toolbox, but our toolboxes are empty. We don't have any tools. So I would say to that community, just open up your arms, trust, support, and find that organic intellectual to mentor that individual, to give them the opportunity and resources that everybody deserves.
Thank you, Savvy. Brittany, you want to add anything?
Savvy and Julius are just checking all of my comments before I get to say anything, because and Savvy, you're right. I mean, it's completely different lifestyles, but the same feelings. We have the same feelings about it. But I love what Julia said. Big ears, little mouth. And I've shared before about my experience with a couple of female ministers that came in while I was incarcerated. The only contact with the outside world we had, only piece of education or knowledge or inspiration I got the whole time I was locked up was two women from the faith-based community. And they didn't come in and preach at us. They didn't come in. They were witnessing without even directly witnessing, because they were just listening to us, and they were getting to know us, and they were asking about our children and about what kind of parents we wanted to be and what we wanted to do. And they play us music, which was like so humanizing. That was it, because you don't hear music in jail. It just felt so, you felt like a human for that moment. They would spray us with body spray because you can't smell anything but brown beans and cornbread, or cabbage. Cabbage days were horrible. But what I think the faith-based community can do beyond any kind of service, any kind of community outreach, which those are great, don't stop. If your organization or church is doing it, don't stop, is something I think Savvy said, and it's humanizing. You don't look at a person based on what their mugshot looks like, but you need to look at a broken human, a human that's probably lived through some things that they'll never say or want to talk about. They've seen and experienced things that probably aren't, a lot of people couldn't handle. To remember that that's just a broken person, and they've got some cracks that need repair, and they're humans.
Brother Dean, can I say something really quickly?
Sure.
Yeah, I just want to just piggyback off of what Savvy said. And my mind got changed a little bit about 7 years ago. And I would say the only ones that could mentor me was the formerly incarcerated. And there's still a point to that. But it was a few years ago, I met a guy. He was an African brother but he lived in Ohio. We was in a conference, and so he was telling me that he would go to all the prisons in Ohio, and he'd never been incarcerated. And he said he would leave out every night. They cuss him out and say, "Go on, you never been locked up. You don't know what it feel like." And he said, I heard it week after week. Them hollering week after week saying, "You don't know what it feel like. You don't know what's incarceration feel like. You don't know what it, they holler, you don't know what it feel like. You don't know what it feel like." He said one day he's walking out and he turned around. He said, what you mean? I don't know what it feel like. He said, it's my compassion that makes me feel what you feel through. No, I haven't been locked up, but my compassion has let me feel what you feel. Know what it feel like to be locked up and eat this and eat that. It's my compassion. And since I'm talking to this group, he then said, Jesus, who had no sin, it was his compassion that felt my sin. It was his compassion that took on, and felt that the same thing. And so I know what Brother Savvy's saying, but at the same time, I want those on here to know that you can be a great and impactful mentor, leader in the reentry. And I know that's what it's hard is saying too, Brother Savvy. but just work off of that compassion, and you will do great things in and for reentry. And that's enough. It's your compassion.
Thanks, Julius. It's a great segue to the next slide that I prepared, because I want those who are listening, particularly those who are members of the faith community, to understand why this is important. A couple of things that you all have mentioned kind of struck me. One was the folks that we're talking about are people who just made a mistake. We tend to stigmatize people pretty easily, but we shouldn't be judged by the worst thing we've ever done. And so, why should members of the faith community, why should followers of Jesus care about this? Well, primarily because, as Julius mentioned, compassion is what we're supposed to be about if we're followers of Jesus. And offering hospitality is a recurring theme. It's a continuing theme. I've noted a couple of scripture passages. I'm not going to start preaching this afternoon. However, what I want us to take away from this is that we talk about welcoming the strangers a lot in our churches as we read scripture, but the people that we're welcoming are not strangers. There are family members, there are brothers and sisters, there are mothers and fathers, they are our children. And so these are not folks who are just being dropped in from outer space. I mean, these are people that have been nurtured in our communities. They've gone to our schools, they've walked our streets. These are people whose families we know, whose families live in the same community as we are. So there's this concept that when we extend hospitality, it's to our extended family, and that is another reason why this becomes important. But that's not to say we shouldn't be offering hospitality to people that we don't know as well. I'm going to give a shout out to the program that I was involved with, Mission Behind Bars and Beyond, because that is a mentoring program that seeks to meet people where they are behind the bars and walk alongside them for 6 months to a year once they leave, to help them make that transition. And so it's part of this theological foundation of who we are as followers of Jesus, that we love our neighbors as ourselves. And in Romans, Paul writes, love never wrongs anyone. Hence, love is the fulfillment of the law. And we can go back to the Old Testament as well with respect to the gift of hospitality. So these are not options. It's not a menu that we pull options out of. This is really the DNA of who we are as followers of Jesus, to be a welcoming, hospitable, loving community that really is on the first line. It should be on the first line when people come back into the community, to welcome them and to provide them with assistance. So the question that I often get is, so what can we do? How do we respond to this? Julia, Savvy, and Brittany have shared some of their thoughts on this. But I want to just add a couple right now. One is to consider mentoring programs that, like Mission Behind Bars and Beyond, but there's a lot of other mentoring programs across the country. Corresponding with people who are incarcerated. Brittany mentioned the impact that those two women had on her when she was incarcerated. Just making that outside contact, reminding people that they haven't totally been forgotten, that their humanity is still respected, to serve as an ally when these people come back into the community. Invite them to worship, but don't just expect them to show up, to walk them into the sanctuary and sit with them and explain to them some of the rituals that they may not be familiar with. And encourage your church members to support folks and programs that support them, like shelters, food ministries. There are programs that provide clothing for people so that when they go for that first job interview, they're dressed nicely. Or if you can't find those in your community, start one. Start one of these ministries, because really the recidivism rate right now is around 40% or more across the country. What we're doing isn't working. And so we need to find new creative ways. And I'm convinced that one of the ways that we make some changes is to live out the message that Jesus brought of being caring and loving, compassionate, and welcoming to people who are on the outskirts of our communities, primarily because they've made a mistake. So I'm going to close with the words from the prophet Isaiah. Share your bread with those who are hungry and shelter the homeless, poor people. Clothe those who are naked and don't hide from the needs of your own flesh and blood. Do this and your light will shine like the dawn, and your healing will break forth like lightning. Your integrity will go before you, and the glory of Yahweh will be your rear guard. So may that be the case for all of us. I'm going to turn it back now to Hector. There may be some questions that came up during presentation. I want to thank the three of you for participating and being here and sharing your insights and your wisdom. It's been quite a blessing to all of us. Hector.
Wow. Yeah, I echo what an experience. And the chat is on fire. People have been reacting, responding, asking questions, even dreaming about having Julius, Brittany, and Savvy come into their own congregations. And I have been able to put to the side few questions. I wish we have another extra hour to answer all of them, but we have some of the emails. Um, Paul Whitmer, who was part of our Prison and Jail Ministries second cohort, Prison and Jail Ministries peer group second cohort, and he is the Minister of Reentry and Congregational Care for Women at the Well. He has a question for the group, and any of you can answer. He says that it will be interesting to know what any of you, or what all of you think about spiritual support and faith formation as part of that reentry process or those reentry processes. And based on your opinion, what is needed and what will be beneficial in that area of spiritual support? So, whoever wants to answer that question is open to all of you.
Yeah, I would say just don't have unexpected or unrealistic expectations. A lot of times with a spiritual walk, that's it, anybody that's been incarcerated or not been incarcerated, they have a lot of times unexpected, unrealistic expectations. It's like, and I think sometimes, like we was talking about the stressors from the strain theory, that's one of them is religious expectations place stressors to cause people to do more crime or to go back. So really just somebody, if you're gonna walk with somebody, then walk with somebody, be right beside them through the ups and the downs and try to minister through them. A spiritual walk is one of growth, of one of maturing, and we all maturing. I always tell people that none of us have our wings like a caterpillar to a butterfly. I've never seen anybody with wings on earth. We all are in our metamorphosis, and I think that's important to know through a spiritual walk.
I'd like to piggyback on that, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Julius, it's brilliant. I think spirituality and connection and faith are pivotal, are critical to a well-rounded, healthy human, right? We all know that. That's part of just being a healthy human. I love that he said, don't set expectations too high. And we got to think about hierarchy of needs. It's hard to obtain or seek a connection with a greater being or God when you don't know what you're going to eat for lunch. And that's a priority, or you don't know where you're going to sleep. So I love that he said walk with them. I think that journey happens instantaneously for some people. It wasn't like that for me. It took years to develop that relationship and to mold it and to fan it and to grow it. But it's great. And I think patience and education and big ears.
Thank you very much. What comes to my mind, Brittany, is that when you were sharing your own example about those ladies that went to your congregation, I mean to your where you were serving, they were doing spiritual care. They were doing by just treating, like you said, treating you as humans. And it reminds me Jesus, that he insisted into reaching out to those that were rejected, and then he will, that was a miracle, and then he will do something else, a sign. So I have another question that again is open to all of you. Is there any legislation, is there anything that is happening that that any of you would like the church to be part of, to be enacted, to be part of that process that might help lower that can help improve the reentry process or make that more successful?
Yeah, I would like to bring into the space the ACLU Smart Justice Advocates. I've been a member of that organization for the last 2, possibly 3 years. It's composed of individuals with lived experiences, composed of individuals that are formerly incarcerated, and you wouldn't believe the work that they do in Frankfurt with legislation, drawing up bills, getting bills passed, lobbying, and just being in the faces of those that change the laws. And they also teach you. I never knew anything about lobbying. I never knew anything even about how to read a bill. I can thoroughly go through a bill now. And these are bills that have affected me and affected people I work with and family members as well. So I would say join organization, join ACLU Smart Justice, attend a meeting and get an understanding of what we're really looking for and what we're trying to do in support of getting some laws changed and understand the bills. That's one of the things that we really push with my organization. We understand that individuals are in the system, but a lot of individuals don't understand what's going on in the system that they're in. So we teach the individual. We utilize readings such as Michelle Alexander's New Jim Crow. And more than likely, when a person understands what they're involved in and how the systematic damage is with probation and parole, with incarceration, hopefully the person will stay out of that system if they just understand how it operates. So my big thing is just join the organization. I just want to uplift the work that the ACLU Smart Justice is doing. Please look it up and take the time to join. Join us on some of the meetings and join us in some of the work that we're doing too.
Amen. Amen. Anybody else?
Don't stop talking about it. Criminal justice will never change if we think we put these people away and we forget about them, because that's what's happened for hundreds of years now. We're putting them there, we're moving on with our lives. So we need to remember that there is a problem. There is not working. What we have right there is not working. So we can't change things overnight. You can't change people's opinions or feelings overnight, but as long as we keep talking about it and the attention is there and people are still listening, that's, I think, the most important thing in making big change, as long as we just keep this a discussion.
Yeah, I agree with Brittany, keeping the discussion. And one of the things I think that we as a church should always keep on discussing is the treatment of sex offenders. Right now, laws are blanketed to kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about. It's like the bank robber with a gun that puts a gun to everybody's head gets the same treatment as somebody that stole candy from the candy store. And so that's how the sex offense policies and laws are created. It's like you got somebody, everybody imagines and are told about the older man with the little baby. That's a sickness. But they don't tell you that a sex offense, it has so many different faces. You're talking about an 18 to a 17-year-old. You know, not condoning any of it, but I'm saying it's too different to blanket it. And so I think with the church, it has to, which should be the face of forgiveness. I think we should look into a lot of the different things that are the sex offense laws, how they're created. They're created out of hate and fear and untruths. And so I think that conversation will bring out a lot more than I can do in the next couple minutes. But yeah, it's a lot in there.
Well, we're thankful. We're thankful for the work that you do, for everything that you're doing. We're thank Brittany, Mr. Savvy, and Julius for their time, and of course Dean. We're thankful for Dean's ministry. And there are many great questions. I have been, cutting and pasting, and we'll figure out how to answer those, or maybe create other type of training based on some of those questions. But unfortunately, um, this we arrived to the end of our webinar today. And I want to thank all of you for spending your time with us today. Today's webinar will be available soon on our webpage, mbacares.org. And we ask you to please share this with your congregation, share this with your network, and keep changing the narrative and the language, and let's move into concrete actions. For more information, and believe me, there is a lot of resources. So for more information about MBA's Prison and Jail Ministries, as well as all the other ministries and excellent work that the MBA is doing, please visit us to mbacare.org. Blessings, and may the rest of your day be one that can bring peace and balance.